In today's video, we'll be going over the Ultimate Legendary Tier List Arena Edition. I'll be ranking all 40 heroes from Triple S rank all the way down to B. Now, unlike most Legendary Tier lists that focus on Arena scoring, I am going to completely ignore it. Arena is a terrible game mode that is not worth investing into. Even with the positive changes we've recently received, I do not recommend investing thousands of orbs just to stay in Tier 21. If you are interested in a tier list that focuses on Arena, I'd recommend checking out Fehology's Legendary Tier list. I'll leave a link in the description. Let's quickly go over the criteria I used to rank them and who will be showing up on this tier list. First and foremost, this tier list is solely composed of legendary heroes. Second, we're going to be focusing on how powerful these legendary heroes are and what unique effects they have. Third, we'll be looking at how well these heroes perform in all game modes, but we will not be considering Arena scoring. Before I start, I know I will probably make a lot of people mad, myself included, as legendaries are a lot of people's favorite heroes, but I did my best to be objective as possible, so please don't take it personally if your favorite isn't highly ranked. Now let's get started. B tier is composed of legendaries who are either old, not meta relevant, or simply are waiting for the refines and remixes to get another chance to stand out. These heroes can perform decently well in some game modes, but they are typically never your first choice for the role they fulfill. At the very bottom of the list, I unfortunately have to put Legendary Self. Legendary Self is a defensive enemy phase sword cav who honestly wasn't the best even on arrival. Self has a lot of things that work against him. First of all, as a cavalry hero, Self immediately has a stat disadvantage when compared to other types of tanks such as infantry or armored heroes, which is a big downside when you also don't have access to premium skills. Armored heroes have access to powerful fighter and save skills that let them stand out, while infantry have access to a plethora of amazing skills like bulwarks, finish skills, Vital Astra, and even no follow-up. Speaking of no follow-up, Self gets absolutely destroyed by it. Self's entire claim to fame is Holy War's End, his preference B skill, that allows him to double before the foe can counterattack. The problem is, Self is reliant on a guaranteed follow-up attack and is really slow. So no follow-up completely turns off his kit and makes him extremely easy to kill in either phase. Unfortunately, Self has no place in any meta and really can't perform well in any game mode currently without an immense amount of help. I'm going to get attacked for this, but next up is Legendary Edelgard. Edelgard was a very cool and unique hero on release with her ability to get triple actions and essentially act as a Gale Force queen. But in recent times, Legendary Edelgard has been completely power crept by herself. That's right, Edelgard has made herself irrelevant. Summer Edelgard can do everything Legendary can, but much better. But that isn't all. Legendary Edelgard also struggles in a lot of game modes. Her weapon aimer is so bad nowadays, you are better off running an inheritable weapon like Seahorse Axe instead. She also struggles a ton with mobility without having Assault Troop. The problem with giving her Assault Troop is you literally need to kill the better version of her to get it. Now lastly, Legendary Edelgard struggles to secure kills against a ton of meta threats, which really reduces the value of having 3 actions. Now the silver lining is that Legendary Edelgard should be getting a refine and remix around next August, and I think there's a good chance she gets Assault Troop for free and will have most of her major problems fixed. Leaf is a really cool legendary. His design is amazing and top tier, but he has aged poorly over time. He no longer has the power to secure kills against a lot of meta threats that are either just too bulky or have a ton of damage reduction. The introduction of Fire Save drastically reduced Leaf's effectiveness in the meta, and even with Endless Influence, it won't help Leaf much as she is a defense mythic and he really wants to be on offense. Now the thing to focus on is that Leaf should be getting his update next month, and Leaf has an amazing base effect and preference special to work with, so as long as IS doesn't completely shaft him, he should become a powerful legendary again soon. Now we have our very first legendary, Fjorm. Fjorm is in an interesting position. Her refine and remix honestly wasn't very spectacular. For some reason, intelligent systems love to screw over distant counter weapons, and this led to Fjorm not getting nearly enough in her weapon, such as stats or effects. When it comes to Ice Mirror 2, it's not even directly better than Ice Mirror 1 in every situation, as it now scales off Fjorm's resistance instead of damage received. The saving grace for Fjorm is that she is an infantry hero, which means she has access to a ton of powerful premium skills that can help her perform in Ether Raids or Arena. Even so, this isn't the hero you're going to be choosing if she isn't your favorite or you are trying to perform well in highly competitive modes. Legendary Ryoma actually got a solid remix and refine. He definitely came out better than most distant counter heroes. Even so, Ryoma is lacking when it comes to meta-relevant roles or effective strategies for game modes like Ether Raids or Summoner Duels. He can perform well as an offensive tank and does decently well as a player-phase sword, but he doesn't excel in either role. As a tank, he lacks the skills needed to protect allies like bulwarks or saves from the highly mobile threats that plague our meta at the moment. As a flyer, he also has just less stats than his contemporaries, and as a damage dealer, he doesn't have the firepower needed nowadays to carve through damage reduction. Overall, Legendary Ryoma is a good hero, but he just doesn't stand out enough. This hurts me more than it could hurt anyone else. I really wanted to put Ike in A tier. He is my favorite hero in the entire game, but I chose the path of integrity and honesty, which is completely overrated. Anyways, as I'm sure most of you are aware, Ike did not get the best refine or remix. His weapon didn't grant enough stats or effects, and his remix essentially just granted Radiant Dawn, Quicken Pulse too. Now Ike does have a few advantages. First, he is an infantry hero, which means he has access to stupidly good skills like finish skills, bulwarks, O skills, and fresh off the press, Special Spiral 4. And if you are a madman like me, you can throw a stupid amount of investment into Ike to make him a pretty good hero. Legendary Ike is typically bulky enough to survive one hit, which is enough for him to retaliate with Radiant Ether, which can do a good amount of damage and heal him up. Ether is typically a powerful special, but it's on a completely different level with damage reduction piercing and plus 10 true damage when combined with the finish skill. Now don't misunderstand, this build doesn't make Legendary Ike into a meta-relevant hero, but it does make him much better. Celica has the foundation to be a great legendary hero, but she hasn't aged the best. Her weapon offering true damage based off the foe's resistance, and her preference B, Soul of Sylvia, offering desperation and no follow-up are amazing, but she lacks the firepower she once had. She's also a bit clunky to use nowadays as she doesn't have an easy way to get into desperation range. Enemies just hit too hard nowadays for her to survive most counterattacks, so that she can drop below 75% HP. We also have just received a mostly better version of Legendary Celica with Ascendant Celica. She has a built-in miracle that just suits Soul of Sophia much better. As a plus 10 owner myself, Celica can be good if she can find a way to get into desperation range, but honestly, she is definitely in need of her remix and refine. Fortunately, that isn't too far away. It should be coming around next May. Next up is going to be Legendary Grima. Grima surprisingly has become quite good due to her refine and remix. The combination of a bunch of stats, guard, and being able to neutralize the foe's bonuses allows Grima to make up for some of the disadvantage flyers typically have. She was actually an amazing raid boss in Summoner Duels in the beginning of the year due to her great mobility and dragon synergy. She has definitely fallen off since then due to AoEs becoming meta, but even so, Grima can be a strong legendary hero and should not be underestimated. Here comes another spicy take, but next up is Legendary Corrin. Corrin is in a similar situation to Celica, where she is just missing some of the tools she really needs to perform at the highest levels. One of the biggest things hurting Corrin is that she needs to pre-charge her PRF special, negating Fang, which means she is either reliant on Shield Pulse in her B slot, or she needs to bring two forms of special charging like Chrom, Asker, or Infantry Pulse. This really hurts Corrin as she would rather run just about anything else like no follow-up or even Bulwark. She's also a bit weak to guard as she needs the full blade effect in her weapon to go through for her to recharge her special. Corrin's other similarity to Celica is that she has an ult that just has everything she wants and just performs way better than her in every single way, in the form of Witch Corrin. When it comes to remixes and refine, Corrin still has about a year to wait unfortunately. A tier is composed of legendaries who can be very powerful in the right situations. These heroes have powerful and unique effects that let them stand out in the current meta, but they often lack the immense firepower of higher range legendaries, or have major weaknesses, or lack versatility. These heroes will commonly be seen in many game modes, but they aren't typically the hero you are most worried about. Let's start off the tier with Rid. Rid was in a similar position to Legendary Self before his remix. Fortunately, his remix gave him some powerful support that lets Rid stand out amongst his peers. Now just like Selef, Rid can struggle as a defensive cav tank. He is very reliant on debuffs to secure kills and to deny follow-ups, which is problematic considering no follow-up, one of the most meta-relevant skills in the game, completely shuts that off. Now fortunately, Rid was given some extremely powerful support in the form of his preference B skill, Freezing Seal 2, which grants a massive attack, defense, and guard debuff that can spread throughout the enemy team. This allows Rid to fulfill a support role on some raid boss teams and to be quite the annoyance to deal with. Next up is Legendary Ephraim. Ephraim is a powerful lance cavalry that has access to a majority of the powerful cavalry effects you would want, such as Canto 2, guaranteed special acceleration, and a guaranteed follow-up attack. But Ephraim even has an anti-guard effect and after combat healing, which allows Ephraim to pump out powerful specials like Ignis and act as a powerful duelist. It also allows him to be an excellent Gale Forcer as he doesn't need to run Heavy Blade and doesn't have to worry about guard. His only concern when it comes to Gale Force is getting -1 special cooldown, which isn't difficult due to the prevalence of Asker or Duo Chrom. With all that said, Ephraim does have his problems, the biggest of all being his middling speed and weakness to no follow-up. This means that Ephraim can struggle to secure kills against opponents who can deny his follow-up, and can die to opponents who engage on him and double. Even so, Ephraim is a great lance cav and a powerful legendary you don't want to ignore. Our boy Legendary Roy lands in A tier. Roy has had a troubling past, and unfortunately his remix and refine didn't fix all of his problems, But even so, Legendary Roy can be a powerful hero in his limited niche. Roy does have some powerful effects, such as his weapon having guaranteed special acceleration and a tempo effect, which makes Roy a fantastic Gale Force hero. His preference C skill, Human Virtue 2, offers some great support for human allies while also giving Roy a boost in power in the form of stats and damage reduction. Unfortunately, that's where the good things end. Roy's biggest problem is his flexibility. Roy needs to be within 2 spaces of allies to get all of his power. He needs his allies to have visible buffs, and he needs them to not be dragons or beasts. All of these limiting factors make Roy difficult to use outside of the one situation of sitting still and tanking. Roy and his team are very weak to panic, and Roy can struggle to player phase at full strength due to the limited range of his C slot. These factors hold Roy back, which can be damning when you are competing in the most populated weapon type in the entire game. Before her remix, Legendary Lyn was often considered the worst legendary in the entire game. Fortunately, Lyn's remix fixed the majority of her problems. Lyn can be a powerful nuke with speed-based true damage, a fire sweep effect that includes dragons, and a ton of stats. Lyn can safely engage against the majority of threats and do very solid damage. The two things that hold Lyn back is the lack of cooldown reduction in her weapon and her over-reliance on speed. First, because she lacks slaying in her weapon, she isn't the best user of Deadeye. This is because she can't reliably activate it in one round of combat without using Flashing Blade. This is partially due to her sweep effect ensuring she won't be counterattacked, giving her that special charge. She does now have the option of running Special Spiral 4 and Ruptured Sky to get past damage reduction, but that leads us to her second problem, speed creep. Lyn is very reliant on speed to get her sweep effect, true damage, and to double. The problem is, if you run Special Spiral 4 or Flashing Blade, then you are giving up speed she desperately needs, especially considering how each new unit is pushing out more and more speed nowadays. Overall, Lyn is a powerful nuke, but she does have a few things holding her back from being one of the best. Gunther got one hell of a remix that allowed her to become an immensely powerful support while also packing quite the punch. Chilling Seal 2 allows Gunther to debuff the majority of the enemy team with a crippling -7 to all stats. This can completely swing matchups as so many meta-relevant matchups come down to speed checks or resistance checks nowadays. The cool thing is, Gunther fully capitalizes on debuffs with her weapon that offers true damage based off them, and doubles down on them with the pledging effect. This allows Gunther to supply herself with up to 28 true damage per hit. Now Gunther is not a top tier nuke, but her combination of support and power makes her a great hero. Legendary Faye is a very unique hero, largely due to her preference special, Life Unending. It makes Faye into an annoying to deal with dragon tank. She also has a ton of stats, which means she can be built in a variety of different ways. The biggest problem with Faye mostly comes down to her special. If Life Unending can't be dealt with, she can annoy you and possibly even kill you. But if you use the plethora of effects that screw over specials, such as Pulse Ties, Pulse Smokes, Atrocity, or even Dual Ice Dual Skill, then Faye essentially doesn't have a special anymore, and becomes much easier to deal with. The other downside to Life Unending is that Faye doesn't gain any combat effects from it. It doesn't help her deal more damage or reduce damage. Overall, Faye can be a bit annoying, but the majority of her power comes from having a ton of stats, something that won't age the best. It's time for another one of my favorite heroes in the entire game, Legendary Hector. Hector can be both a great tank and also offer great support. Hector's weapon offers him a ton of stats, damage reduction, and follow-up denial, which allows him to be a wonderful tank. But what really allows Legendary Hector to stand out as a unit is Ostia's Pulse 2, which not only provides a visible +6 defense and resistance buff, but also a times pulse effect for Hector and allies globally as long as the tactics condition is met. This is extremely powerful as it not only makes Hector's combat better, but allows Hector to help pre-charge specials for any type of ally, including armor, cavalry, or flyers. This gives Hector a unique niche in the game and makes him an excellent support in several game modes, especially Summoner Duels S, where he can be a top tier support for raid boss teams. The original Lord Marth lands in A tier. Legendary Marth is a fantastic hero who received a ridiculously powerful remix and refine. Marth is one of the premier heroes to stat stack. His weapon offers him +8 to all stats, and that's not even including the bonus doubler effect that can grant up to an additional +7 to all stats. But what really pulls this kit together is his built-in Uni effect that offers Marth a blanket of security against debuffs and panic effects, meaning it's safe to throw a ton of support on him. Marth also has two preference skills in the form of Shining Emblem and Binding Shield 2. Shining Emblem allows Marth to buff himself up so he isn't relying on outside support, while also allowing him to buff his allies when the special procs. While Binding Shield 2 allows Marth to safely engage on foes as long as he outspeeds them by 5, or if they are a dragon. This kit makes Marth a deadly threat to deal with and an amazing option for raid boss teams. But that's not to say Marth is perfect. Marth's biggest weakness is effects that can ignore his buffs, like dull effects and lull effects. These effects can completely cripple Marth and remove a ton of his power. Martha can also struggle defensively as he doesn't have built-in no follow-up or damage reduction. These effects can be given via skills or outside support, but can come at a cost of other effects Martha needs. Legendary Lucina has been an excellent legendary since release, largely due to the mobility she could offer in Arena, something that was unheard of until her father stole her niche. Lucina got a solid remix that allows her to become a powerful support hero that can provide mobility, a guaranteed follow-up attack, and powerful debuffs. This allows Lucina to work well with slower heroes who need guaranteed follow-up attacks, or units who need additional movement. As a combat hero, Lucina is good, but not amazing. She does get to take advantage of her own debuffs with the pledging effect in her weapon, and her guaranteed follow-up attack support does give her a pseudo no follow-up effect due to her solid speed. But she can struggle due to lack of cooldown reduction in her weapon, lack of any type of true damage, and doesn't have the safest way to engage due to no sweep effect or damage reduction. Here's another controversial placement, but we have legendary female Byleth. Female Byleth has been in an interesting position since her release due to the constant comparisons between herself and her male counterpart. Female Byleth does have some unique and interesting effects, such as tempo support for herself and allies within 2 spaces. Also, she can grant herself a visible attack and speed buff plus 7, no follow-up, and a formation buff. This allows female Byleth to be a mobile threat. Now let's discuss some of her weaknesses. First, tempo can be a great support, but is honestly not the best effect you would want on a drive. The heroes who would really love this effect are offensive threats like Gale Forcers, but Byleth doesn't fit into those archetypes or strategies well. The second downside is female Byleth's lack of damage reduction piercing. Now recently we received Special Spiral 4 that can fix this problem. The problem is that it comes at a big price for female Byleth, her sweep effect. Typically, female Byleth takes advantage of her built-in no follow-up by running either wind sweep or water sweep, which allows her to safely engage against enemies and not to die to counterattacks. But if you put Special Spiral 4 on her, she no longer can run these skills. So essentially she is put into a position where she either gets to have the protection of a sweep effect or the nuke power that comes with Special Spiral 4, and that is why female Byleth lands in A tier. Legendary Micaiah is a powerful colorless mage who has a ton of damage output due to her dual effectiveness against armored and cavalry heroes. Micaiah also has access to the very niche Maiden Solace, which acts as a harsh command plus, combined with a reciprocal aid effect. This effect allows Micaiah to safely enter her Desperation 2 range, but that's not all. She also has her preference B skill, Prescience, which grants her additional stats and 30% damage reduction. Just enough to allow Micaiah to typically survive a counterattack and set up her Desperation. Legendary Micaiah can be a very powerful nuke, but she does have some weaknesses that hold her back. Similar to female Byleth, she doesn't have damage reduction piercing, and Special Spiral 4 comes at the cost of Prescience, removing one of her safe ways to enter Desperation 2 range. Lastly, she has middling speed and no follow-up, which can be problematic. Our final hero in A tier is going to be Legendary Tiki. Tiki is in a unique position as a speedy far save that can also offer some support. Her weapon allows her to be deceptively tanky, and the built-in distant counter allows her to run a different seal that can offer more stats. With Everyone 2 allows Tiki to not only buff herself with a visible defense and resistance buff of plus 6, but also her allies. And of course, having a preference far save that offers additional stats is really nice. The combination of Hardy Fighter and Tiki's solid speed makes it difficult to double her, but Tiki's main downsides are her dual weakness to armor and dragon effectiveness, and her low visible resistance, which means she is vulnerable to AoEs, which have completely taken over the meta. Tiki is still an amazing option for a far save, especially when you consider how much farther you could possibly save due to her PRF save. We now step into S tier where some of the most powerful legendaries reside. These heroes all have powerful effects that allow them to excel in one or more roles and have unique effects that let them stand out against the competition. In the bottom of S tier is Legendary Xander. Xander is a powerful axe cavalry that has a plethora of powerful effects such as no follow-up, special acceleration, and even Canto. But what really makes Xander unique is his powerful preference B skill, Chivalry, that grants him up to 50% damage reduction and plus 5 to all stats. This allows Xander to be unique as a tanky axe cav duelist. He can easily spam out powerful specials like Luna or Ether, and can even heal up with his built-in healing. While Xander can be a good option for game modes like Summoner Duels, he does struggle to fit into a lot of strategies or roles. For example, Xander could have been an excellent Gale Forcer, but his built-in healing makes it difficult for him to get into Wings of Mercy range. And when it comes to being a nuke, Xander can do a solid job, but is lacking when you compare him to his competition like Summer Dimitri, Groom Roy, Brave Sella, or even Legendary Nana, who all have powerful ways to boost their damage. Speaking of powerful cavalry heroes, Legendary Erica is an amazing cavalry duelist. Legendary Erica has a ton of powerful effects that allow her to perform all kinds of roles in different strategies. She has almost every effect a cavalry hero would want: special acceleration, damage reduction, Canto 2, no follow-up, and even true damage. This allows Erica to spam out 2 cooldown specials or even be an excellent Gale Force hero while ensuring she can survive and pump out damage. When it comes to weaknesses, Erica can struggle due to guard, and her lack of cooldown reduction does limit which specials she can use to an extent. The real reason Erica isn't higher is due to the very stiff competition in her weapon and movement type combo. Erica just isn't able to put out as much damage as her contemporaries or have as good survivability, two things that are important in today's current meta. Legendary Chrom is the hero who broke Arena. His combination of armor effectiveness, penalty neutralization, and most importantly his stupidly powerful preference assist skill to change fate, made Chrom into the premier legendary hero of the entire game. Chrom not only offered power, but most importantly he offered mobility to a game mode that typically had none. Also, to change fate, AI is stupid and annoying and has probably cost everyone a game or two. Nowadays Chrom has fallen off a bit, hence why he isn't in a higher tier. But the other major reason is the existence of Duo Chrom, who does almost everything better than Legendary Chrom. Similar to Legendary Elgard, Chrom has power crept himself out of the meta. The cool thing is, Chrom is due for a remix around July next year, meaning it won't be long before he's at the top of the game again. When Legendary Claude released, he was one of the most insane heroes in the entire game. Claude has powerful effects like no follow-up, which aren't typically available to flying heroes. But where it really made Claude ridiculous is Fallen Star, his preference B skill. This skill not only offered Claude 80% damage reduction against the foe's first attack, but also granted him a buff that gave Claude 80% damage reduction after combat. And that's not even talking about the gravity effect that can completely shut down entire teams. Claude can be an extremely annoying hero to kill and tank. Now Claude's damage potential has fallen off a bit. Tanks have become much more difficult to kill, and Claude doesn't have an extremely powerful way to put out damage unfortunately. Legendary Julia got a great remix that has made her a powerful nuke in our current resistance and dragon meta. Her weapon Virtuous Naga gives Julia a ton of stats, dragon effectiveness, damage reduction, a guaranteed follow attack, and even close counter against dragons. Her preference B, Light and Dark 2, grants Julia a massive stat advantage against foes. But what really makes Julia so great at the moment is the current meta. The meta is filled with dragons, who Julia just destroys, and a ton of resistance checks that Julia once again excels at. This means Julia can carve through damage reduction effects such as Dragon Wall. Julia's biggest problem is her lack of no follow and middling speed, which can be fixed to an extent with proper builds or outside support. Legendary Sheeta is one of the most unique legendaries in the entire game. In my opinion, she's one of the most annoying heroes to deal with. This is largely due to her unique Vantage effects from her preference B skill, Faithful Loyalty. This skill gives her permanent advantage against cavalry and armored heroes who she is effective against, offensive no follow-up, and a Vantage buff after her first combat. This allows Sheeta to be a deadly threat that you need to be cautious dealing with, as if she is able to position correctly, she can engage on your team, snipe a main threat, then be impossible to deal with. She also has Canto 2, which allows her to be extremely mobile. Sheeta's two main weaknesses are Hardy Bearing, which can completely trivialize a lot of her uniqueness, and missing kills. Often Sheeta just doesn't have enough firepower to one-shot heroes, which can cost her life. Even so, Sheeta is a powerful legendary and one you do not want to underestimate, especially in summoner duels. Legendary Lilina has stood the test of time as one of the premier AoE nukes in the game. This is largely due to her ability to instantly charge her preference special, Gifted Magic, and her built-in Hardy Bearing. These two simple but powerful effects allow Lilina to get past a ton of powerful tanks in the meta, especially ones with low visible resistance. Lilina's main weakness is that she doesn't have an easy way to recharge her special if it gets turned off by things like Pulse Smoke or Pulse Ties. But even so, there are ways to do that like Duo Chrom nowadays, and with the current meta leaning more and more towards AoEs and resistance checks, I expect to see a lot of Legendary Lilina in the future. Legendary Myrrh showed up, kicked Gatekeeper down a staircase, and showed him what a real powerhouse hero could look like. Myrrh is just an amazing hero who can be an excellent frontliner and tank. Her weapon grants her a majority of the things she needs, such as a guaranteed follow-up attack and 30% damage reduction, even against AoEs. But what makes her stand out is her preference C skill, Darkling Guardian, that grants her a visible resistance and defense buff, making her even more resilient against AoEs, and Warp Bubble, an effect that can stop warping shenanigans. This makes Myrrh into an invaluable hero who can completely shut down meta threats like Viral Catra and Harmonic Sonia. Now Myrrh does have a few weaknesses, such as being weak to both dragon effectiveness and bows, so you will need to consider that when choosing her for your team. Either way, I expect Myrrh to become much more valuable as warping effects get added to the game, such as more and more Oath Force skills. If you told me Legendary Dimitri would somehow become one of the best legendaries in the game when he released, I wouldn't have believed you. But Dimitri has had an amazing comeback story this past year. The introduction of Vital Astra, Speed Smoke 4, and easy access to no follow-up via outside support has made Legendary Dimitri into a beast of a hero. Legendary Dimitri can stack up to 3 layers of damage reduction without even running a damage reduction B skill, which is crazy to think about. And Atrocity has only gotten better with time. The combination of true damage allowing Dimitri to carve through his enemies and the crippling power of Omni Smoke has made Dimitri into a powerful raid boss and frontliner. The Omni Smoke in particular allows Dimitri to dive into the backline of the enemy team, snipe a key foe, and then reduce the stats of the rest of the team. But most importantly, it turns off the foe's specials, which is a ridiculously powerful effect when you consider just how reliant the current meta is on specials due to Hardy Fighter and AoEs. Now Dimitri's main weakness is his low resistance stat and how reliant he is on outside support, such as Fallen Lilith or speed infantry tactics, which means a hero like Duo Thor, who can easily remove those buffs, can pretty easily handle Legendary Dimitri. Speaking of 3 houses, let's talk about Legendary Male Byleth. Byleth's power comes from 2 effects: his ability to grant himself and allies no follow-up, one of the most meta-defining abilities in the game, and Sublime Heaven, his preference special that slices through damage reduction. Now honestly, Byleth's no follow-up support has become way less unique than it once was, but it's still a very powerful effect, and it allows Byleth to run skills like Wind Sweep or Water Sweep in his B slot, which allows him to safely engage against powerful threats. When it comes to Sublime Heaven, this special is still ridiculously strong, and even with the introduction of Special Spiral 4, it still shouldn't be underestimated. The reason for this is Sublime Heaven is extremely powerful against dragons and beasts, who are becoming more and more dominant in the current meta. This special literally doubles in power from 25% of Byleth's attack to 50% of Byleth's attack against dragons and beasts. This means Byleth can melt many of the meta threats right now. And this is what really allows male Byleth to shine over his female counterpart. He gets to have his cake and eat it too. He gets to have damage reduction piercing, a safe way to engage, and a more powerful special that excels in the current meta, while female Byleth only gets to choose one of those. Our final hero in S tier is going to be the Witch Legendary, Atri. Atri is just an absolutely ridiculous hero, from her amazing art to her busted kit. Atri is one of the few ranged heroes in the game who gets Canto 2, and this allows her to be ridiculously mobile when you include her flying movement. And that's not even discussing the immense amount of power she has. Her weapon and preference B skill, Divine Recreation, gives her a ton of stats, making her deceptively more bulky than she seems. But most importantly, it gives her an Ice Mirror-esque effect, where she gains 30% damage reduction and then reflects that damage back at the opponent. This allows Atri to safely engage on dangerous foes and use their own firepower against them. If this was the beginning of the year, Atri would easily be in triple S tier, but the year hasn't been too kind to her. Medius introduced Canto Control, drastically robbing Atri of her mobility power in game modes like Summoner Duels. And Farsaves gave up using Distant Counter in Summoner Duels, which greatly weakened Atri's ability to reflect damage back at her foes. And because of that, Atri is going to land in S tier. We have finally reached double S tier. These heroes have some of the most powerful effects that have ever been introduced in the Fire Emblem Heroes, are top tier nukes, or even offer some of the most powerful support the game has ever seen. Legendary Sigurd was one of the heroes to break the game. For a period of time, you couldn't escape this man, as he led a crusade of destruction against you in Ether Raids and Arena. While that period of time has ended, Legendary Sigurd still offers one of the most powerful effects in the entire game in the form of Holy Knight Aura, a 2 cooldown special that offers Sigurd a passive extra space of movement, and when procced, gives the entire team globally extra movement and +6 attack. Now while saves and the safe defense have tempered Sigurd's influence on the meta, saves have just received a massive nerf in the form of Emblem, meaning Sigurd is once again free to rain terror on the meta. Speaking of ridiculously powerful genealogy heroes, let's talk about Sigurd's wife, Legendary Deirdre. Deirdre is easily one of the most slept on heroes in the entire game. She is just ridiculously powerful in our current meta. Just like Legendary Julia, Deirdre is great in the current Dragon and Resistance meta as she excels in both roles. But what makes Deirdre stand out is her preference special, Circle of Balance, which is anything but balanced. This special is essentially a 2 cooldown iceberg with a built-in passive miracle effect. This allows Deirdre to survive all kinds of matchups she has no right to survive, and makes it very difficult to take her down. When you combine this with the massive amount of stats she can get from her weapon, up to 18 attack, resistance, and defense, you can begin to see why Deirdre is such a big threat in the current meta. And to top it off, you can even run Special Spiral 4 on her if you want to completely ignore damage reduction as well. Deirdre's only downside is her middling speed and lack of no follow-up, which can be addressed to an extent with outside support. Legendary Azura is once again another legendary who dominated the meta on release. She was a hero that cannot be ignored in both Ether Raids and Arena at the time. Nowadays, Legendary Azura isn't as dominant as she once was, but she is still easily one of the best dancers in the entire game. And it's mostly for the same reasons as before. She can grant a hero +6 to all stats, extra movement if they're a fire or infantry hero, and now even no panic, which allows her to be the best dancer for raid boss teams. She can even run something like infantry speed tactic to offer no follow-up support as well. What else is there to say? A dancer who can transform any hero she dances into a dangerous threat is exactly what you want in most game modes. Our final hero in double S tier is going to be the one and only legendary Eliwood. Eliwood has been a great support since release, but his refine and remix took him to an entirely new level. He now offers some of the best support in the entire game, and is a powerful combat hero who can actually hold his own. Eliwood can easily grant bonus Stellar, plus 6 attack, speed, and defense, Kanto 1, and no panic to a hero, transforming them into a mobile, deadly monster. And the coolest part is, he grants those effects to himself as well, on top of his weapon that grants him 50% true damage and a dull all effect. Now what makes Eliwood stand out even more apart from his competition is that all of this support is action free, meaning he doesn't need to dance anyone or rally them or do anything. All of these effects just happen at the beginning of the turn, and that is really powerful as it allows Eliwood to offer additional mobility support via smite or even act as a combat unit on your team. Eliwood is just a full package and is definitely a hero worth picking up. Triple S tier contains the 4 legendary heroes I consider the very best in the game right now. These heroes stand above their peers as top tier meta threats and powerhouses in their respective roles. These heroes are powerhouses in every game mode and should always be considered when planning out your teams. First, we have the second best sword cavalry in the entire game, Legendary Nana. Nana's power comes from her very unique effects to completely ignore damage reduction and to ignore defensive specials like Pavis or Miracle. These two effects allow Nana to have a very powerful niche in the current meta. But what pushes her over the top is when you combine those two effects with her conditionalist Desperation effect, Kanto, and 20% true damage. These allow Nana to melt her opponents and to retreat safely afterwards, which is exactly what you want in game modes like Summoner Duels or Arena. Now the one downside to Nana is she can be extremely squishy. Her defense and resistance is nothing to write home about, and she also doesn't have defensive no follow-up, meaning if she gets engaged on, a lot of times she will die. But with proper handling and planning, Nana can be an unstoppable threat that will cause your enemies a massive headache. Our newest entry, Legendary Veronica, has stormed onto the scene. Veronica is ridiculously powerful. This unit can melt through tanks like it's nothing, and she has just about every effect a ranged mage cav could want, such as slaying, a buttload of stats, a desperation effect with no HP condition, and even a full sweep effect. But that's not all. Her preference special Enclosure also ignores damage reduction, has a built-in tempo effect, and is only 2 cooldown, 1 when you consider her built-in slaying. This allows Veronica to engage on enemies and burn them into pieces before they even get a chance to counterattack. Her full sweep effect means she can even get past Vantage units, which is a big upside. The only thing I have seen Veronica struggle to kill is max investment Brave Hectors and Athunes and Aether Raids, and that is largely due to the massive stat inflation because of mythic buffs. And to be fair, that was a +1 Veronica versus a +10 maxed out Brave Hector and Athune. Expect to see Legendary Veronica everywhere in every game mode. She's just that powerful. Legendary Alm was the original tank buster when he was released. He was in every single game mode and sliced through tanks left and right. Over time he had fallen off, but with his remix, Legendary Alm has once again become one of the best nukes in the entire game. Luna Arc, Alm's weapon, grants him attack and speed, anti-guard, a wind sweep effect, but most importantly, 25% true damage based off the foe's defense. These effects allow Alm to safely engage on foes, ensure his specials proc, and scale his damage no matter how tanky the foe is. When you combine this with his updated special, Lunar Flash 2, which is essentially a better Deadeye, Alm can almost kill any hero in the entire game. Alone, Alm is a powerful nuke with a build like this I've been showing, but if you can offer Alm some outside support in the form of Infantry Speed Tactic or Infantry No Follow-Up, Alm can take it to the next level by running Water Sweep. This gives Alm a full sweep effect that allows him to engage against any foe and annihilate them safely. The only real improvement Alm could have had is a built-in slaying effect, as that would allow him to proc 2 Lunar Flashes with Bridal Catcher support. But honestly, that's just a tiny nitpick. The number 1 legendary hero in the game, in my opinion, is Legendary Ninian. This hero is just ridiculously, stupidly busted. I don't know how anyone can sleep on this hero. Ninian is essentially a top tier offensive threat, dressed up as a dancer who gets a free Gale Force. But even that doesn't do Ninian justice, because she can also have a sweep effect against foes, meaning she can safely engage on enemies, even Vantage units. And that's not even the end of it. Ninian has insane mobility. She can literally move 7 spaces in 1 turn while dancing an ally and killing a foe. Oh, and let's not forget she can casually debuff enemies -7 defense and resistance by dancing, and grants herself a visible 6 attack and speed. Ninian is the most powerful offensive dancer in the game, hands down, and it's not even close. Other dancers may offer some extra support, but none can fulfill the role Ninian can offer on Aether Raid's defense or in Summoner Duels. This hero by far is one of the best heroes in the entire game, and is my choice for the #1 legendary hero in Fire Emblem Heroes. And with that, my legendary tier list is complete. 40 legendary heroes ranked from SSS all the way down to B. Do you agree with my rankings, or would you change them up? In your opinion, who is the best legendary in the game? But more importantly, who's your favorite? I'd love to hear your opinions in the comment section down below. If you haven't yet, go check out my Intelligent Systems favorite and most hated game in the top left, or some more tier lists in the bottom right. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. This has been Oblivion. I'll catch you all later.